Let me introduce the speaker of the day, Pooja Dalvi. She leads our data services offering and is also our global customer success manager. She's responsible for some of our larger verticals across customer segments, ranging from food and packaging machinery, pumps, pump manufacturers, inspection and monitoring tools, amongst others. She comes from a technology consulting background and specializes in data visualization and analytics. At Entytle, her specific role is to work with customers across these said verticals and help them transition to proactive workflows across aftermarket, sales, service, using our data science and AI capabilities. So with that short introduction, I hand over the session to Pooja.
Hey, thanks, DJ. Hey, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thanks for dialing into our webinar. Today, I'll be speaking about one of the most important, however, more often than not very well addressed topic of self-assessing if your organization is in fact ready for spare part demands based on the data that you have today. So coming to why, it's important in terms of having spare part data clean, let's take a step back. We've all been reading reports and seeing signs of an impending recession. We've all been speaking about it. And we all also know that a recession affects sales, specifically equipment sales. So you're going to have decreased equipment sales. Customers tend to tighten their budgets or postpone or reduce spending. But you have demands of repairs and maintenance that typically increase. So you'll see on the left-hand side, we have census data, which is a graph on the left. It shows the increase in the repair and maintenance revenue. And the United States Census Bureau as well aligns with that same fact that CAGR for service and maintenance has in fact grown at a rate of 17.8 from 2021 to 2023. And projecting this into the future, exactly like what past has shown us, according to Zion's market research as well, it supports the fact that parts market is going to keep increasing. So this just shows you how important it is to reflect on how prepared you are for an increase in aftermarket service and sales, and also to scale it going forward. So it's not just, be prepared for it, but also think of it as in the future, how is this going to help you through it. Now, while you're reflecting on how good your spare parts data is, maybe let's walk through a specific situation that the sales team or your sales team would go through. Probably some of you on the call would also be going through this. So when a customer calls your order desk, it probably takes around 30 minutes to get through with the details of the customer, even before actually placing the order or even going through the order processing procedure. So the customer calls you. You'd first want to look into more details of the customer. So you check your database on customer details. Next, you would probably ask the customer the serial number they would like to place an order for. Then you would probably have to, look through their order history in terms of when was it purchased, what exactly was it, what type of an equipment it was. Then probably you'd also have to go through your PDFs, which would be your machine drawings, to see how the equipment was made up, what parts are actually aligned to it, what kits are applicable to it. And maybe let's take a step even further. One of those parts is obsolete. What do you do in that case? Then you go about looking for another data source where, you have the mapping between an obsolete part and a recent part number. So all of this is 30 minutes of your and your customer's time. And it's a lot of cost, which is not great for productivity. And it happens because of all the hurdles mentioned on the slide that we went through this particular example. So you have a lot of PDFs today which contain machine part relationships. It could also be PDFs which actually have customer data in it. You could have inconsistent part item numbers and descriptions. We often see, from our experience, we've seen a lot of places where a certain kit or a certain roller is shown in 4 or 5 different ways, although it's the exact same kit or roller. You have bill of material structure, which is flat, but you do want to see it in a hierarchy. It's difficult for you to do that because everything is probably in PDFs, or maybe your database doesn't support that. You have inconsistent, nomenclature in terms of part categorizations. So it's not very clean to see what kind of categories of parts sit together. Probably you have it across 4 to 5 categories. And then, of course, you have part pricing inconsistencies too. Maybe a certain region or even a certain territory has a different pricing based on the others. So you have to overcome all these hurdles to actually get to clean data. And we are going to get through it, but it's definitely not a small hurdle. All of these make up into a bigger hurdle when we look at the whole big picture. So what I'm going to do right now is we're going to start a poll. DJ, if you don't mind, if you could bring in the poll. So this poll is basically, if you're walking through the exact same example that I described before, when a customer calls you, what are the specific bottlenecks, if not all, probably a combination of some of these, in spare parts data that's hindering your aftermarket selling? So I'm going to give it probably 2 minutes to see what we get. I wouldn't be surprised if there are more than one which are more popular.
Pooja, let's give it, 1 more minute. I think
Sure.
we're getting responses. All right. In the interest of time, I think we should move forward. I'll go ahead and end the poll and launch the result. Okay, I'm sharing the results. I think about 36% people participated, so you should see that on your screens now.
Great. Thanks, DJ. So I see it's spread out against multiple categories. I see inconsistent part pricing is one. There's inconsistent part naming and categorization tied up with obsolete part numbers and bill of material and or drawings. And then, of course, we have the flat bill of material structure. It's pretty common. I'm pretty surprised, to be honest, that there's no one who's voted for PDFs containing machine part relationships. Maybe there are different kind of PDFs which are being referred to right now. But all right, this is great insight. And based on this insight, through the results of the poll, we see that it's not a very quick fix. Data transformation is definitely a journey. So until you actually reflect internally or embark on starting, one of your digital transformation journeys, only then you're going to realize that there are quite a few challenges that you would have to get through. It's not going to be very simple. You would need to get through data quality, structuring the data right, making data consistent across various data sets and sources that you use, having a decentralized data, and also setting a context for the data. So it's pretty important to have all of this to actually make sense of the data that you'd want to see in terms of the parts data, and also to have a certain project going ahead. So we have the tools to get through all the challenges associated with parts data. I'll get to that in the next slide or two. But here's one example of an actual data profile for one of our customers we worked on using our proprietary tool, which is the Install Base Studio, which shows problems with parts data. So you can actually see categorization is a problem over here. There are multiple parts which actually belong to a single category, but they haven't been categorized yet. So there's no consistent nomenclature, different types of parts which could be defined in a certain way, are defined in multiple various ways. And then there are invalid and missing values within the data set as well. And this is all because this particular data profile we're looking at has come through many, many different sources. Not just ERP systems, not just data sources, it's also actually through regions. And as we know, in global organizations, in big organizations, all of this data is not really, structured in the same way across regions, across business units, or even across geographies. So coming to Entytle Data Services, we are experts in equipment manufacturing industry. We've gained experience through working through hundreds and millions of manufacturing data records. And of course, we have a team of experts who are very well versed with the OEM business, with the use cases and also the challenges, due to which our process is definitely faster than a usual data related project because we've done this before. We're also cost efficient because we have purpose-built tools and domain experience, and you wouldn't have to put capital cost into purchasing any new tools or technologies for projects because we come together as a part and parcel. So apart from the Entytle platform, this specific offering is actually going to help you accelerate, your digital transformation journey. Now, coming back to, the original problem that we described earlier on the call situation where we walked through how you would get a customer call and take 30 minutes even prior to order creation. So Entitled services could help make this process more efficient and more productive by putting down the time to just 5 minutes. How do we do that? Let's walk through this. So let's say the customer calls you, tells you the serial number they would like to place an order for. You have PDFs which are pre-parsed and extracted by Entytle for you. So you know what part numbers actually make up that serial number. You don't have to go through these PDFs anymore. This parts data is already profiled, it's cleansed. So even if there's an obsolete part number, it's pre-mapped to a newer part number. There's even a category that it's mapped to. So you even know the category which it lies within. And there's also a pricing for the same because we standardize the parts data, not just at the categorization level, but even at the pricing level. So now you have absolutely everything in one place and you've gone from 20 minutes to just 5 minutes of getting all the information that you wanted when you're talking to the customer about the equipment that they have and the parts related to it. And depending on where you're at with your data maturity, we could also clean out your customer data and dedupe it, enrich it, and map it to these serial numbers and propose parts to be sold to them so that you wouldn't have to wait for that customer to call you. It's going to be more of a proactive approach where based on all the PDFs, all the bill of material data, based on all the pricing that we have, even before a customer calls you, you are able to call a customer with all of this data. So it just becomes more proactive and, you're making sure that your customer is not going to competitors and you're actually covering the full potential that you could. Now I'll walk you through one of our customer stories where data services around parts help them with their transformation journey. And maybe based on the poll results, this is actually going to be pretty interesting because it's around pricing. So let's have a look at it. One of our customers was in the billion-dollar industry working in supply chain automation technologies. They were working on implementation of a global parts pricing strategy. But because they had non-standardized and unorganized parts data, it was a huge hurdle for them. Why was this, not standardized, unorganized? It was due to regional ERPs because it's global. They had in-house versus vendor parts as well. So this all resulted in different ways of numbering, categorizing parts. The pricing was absolutely different. It was unclean data in terms of quality. With our services, they were then able to consolidate variation of vendor names, mine other sources of data and fields for parts number data. They could standardize the formats of these part details, and they could also create categorizations based on numbers and descriptions. And all of this resulted into a 27% additional parts number determination, which we didn't have before. And 23% of duplicates as well were uncovered, which were candidates for merging. So this just helped them propel the pricing strategy that they were going towards, and they were successfully able to launch that project. And again, as we've been speaking through the webinar, scaling your own aftermarket business depends on the foundation, which isn't just data, but it's actually clean data. So with a poor foundation, I wouldn't say you wouldn't be able to do aftermarket business, but it's only going to cost you more in terms of processes, more resources, more time, and scaling up would need a lot of investment due to everything that we discussed. So, re-emphasizing the fact that clean parts data is definitely the foundation to scale your aftermarket business. And I'm going to open it up for question and answers. DJ, I'm not sure if you've gotten any questions yet. She could discuss.
Sure. Let me just double check. I think there's a question that just came in. All right. There's actually two. So, okay, let's take the first one. Okay. The individual is asking, what does your project, what does the average project timeline for such use cases look like? I'm paraphrasing what they're asking, but that's
Okay.
yes, yeah.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So that's a good question. The average the project timeline actually depends on how much we are covering in terms of the data serviced. For the one that we just spoke about in terms of the use case, I believe it was around 6 to 8 weeks. So again, the entire assessment happens even prior to the project, where we then determine how much time it's going to take, how much cost it's going to take, according to the scope of the project. But it's usually not as long as, a year or 2 years. It's usually 2 or 3 months. And then we could keep scaling it and make it into a repeatable process.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay, the next one. Does your service, and I'm assuming they're talking about the data service, provide reports or analytics to track progress and measure improvements during the project? I'm fairly certain this, there's a background to this question, because a lot of the OEMs, Pooja, as we all know, they typically start off with a DIY or a build it yourself kind of a project. And over a period of time, I'm fairly certain that, people, while initially the reports are there and the analytics is there, but over a period of time, people tend to lose focus, or there's just so many conflicting priorities, and then they lose track of the project, and before you know it, it's another one in the graveyard. So I'm fairly certain Jack is asking this question from that perspective. Jack, in case that's not the intent, speak up. But if it is, then Pooja, the question is to you. Do we provide reports, analytics, to track progress and measure improvements during the project?
Yeah, that's a great question. And DJ, you rightly spoke about it. Maybe before I answer the question, setting a bit more context, with any kind of service, with any kind of a project that you're doing, the end goal is not just, to begin the project, but also to understand if it's helping you out, if you're on track, if there's a way by which you could see it in some kind of a report or a dashboard to let you know that, hey, we've reached this percentage of the project, 50% of your parts data is clean. We've already converted 80% of your PDFs into data extracts. So yes, we do have reports or analytics that we track it with. We have in-house tools which easily bring out these reports by actually showing you the profile of your data, which was prior to the work that we began with, where we can have a standard timeline around which we can keep showing you how the profile is getting better, and you can always refer back to it, just so even you can see how the progress of the project is going on. And in terms of improvements during the project, we have very, very often touch points based on the scope of the project, where we actually take feedback in terms of, based on the metrics that you're seeing through the dashboards or the reports we're sending to you, are we on track? Is there something else that you want to do? Just so it's not like, this is what you gave to us, we dump it back to you saying that this is it and the project is over. So there's continuous improvement, and there's continuous report and analytics and touch points with you as well, to make sure that you're happy with the scope and with the results that we're getting.
All right, and then I think we have one more question that just came in from Chris. And this is more generic, but it goes something like this. Are there any best practices or strategies that our organization, which is their organization, can implement to prevent future inconsistencies after a part data cleanup? And this is super interesting, right? This is not a one-time thing. And I think most OEMs realize this, because while they clean historical data, there's always the next batch, the next set of data that's coming, and that's going to face the same challenges, because again, CRMs were not built for data entry, a cleaner data entry, and ERP is still loading all of the incorrect parts data. So this is interesting. Pooja, over to you.
Yeah, no, definitely an interesting question. And I think this comes through even with any of our platform releases as well, on is this, something that keeps going on? And is there like a process through it? What I would suggest is once you have a setup in terms of, okay, you're doing a project for a one-time parts data cleanup, make sure that that project also has a timeline right in the beginning or a stage where you're also thinking of how can you make this process ongoing, where it's not just one time. And we do that with our data services. So we make sure that it's a script or a certain job that we're running based on whatever we've done initially, and it keeps running on a recurring basis so that you don't have to ask us to trigger it as and when you want it. Let's say 6 months down the line, you again feel like, okay, my parts data is again bad. What do I do about it? There's a continuous job that keeps running just so that you don't have to go through this process again. And it's just delta or incrementals which are being held better. Also, what I'll suggest and what has worked in some of the projects I've worked on is there's one part where, you are hiring services to do your cleanup, or you probably have a project team who's doing that. But there's also a part where you need to assess if some of these processes can be made better within your organization. So let's say, for example, during order tracking, right? Even if you have multiple PDFs which have all of these details, maybe there's like a project number or some field that is missing or is in the 4th page instead of the 1st page. So it's basically inconsistent going forward as well. So just set up a process in which order placing happens, order tracking happens, creating an invoice happens, creating a quote happens, just so it's standardized right from the beginning. And then, of course, the parts project data, the project that you're going forward with, or any services cleanup that you're going forward with, let's make sure it's recurring and it's not just a one-time thing that you're doing as well.
Some great insights, Pooja. I think, yeah, I don't see any more questions coming in or anyone raising their hand. So those are 3 great questions. We can sum it up at this point of time, and we can give a couple of minutes back to the people. And of course, as we said earlier, we'll send out the recording to the folks who registered for this event. And in case you need to talk more about this particular offering, as always, you can reach out to Pooja. Pooja, any parting thoughts?
No, thanks a lot, everyone, for joining in. I'm hoping to hear back from all of you. Of course, we're going to be sending out this recording. So don't shy away from reaching out to me. And we're going to have many more topics like this coming up in the near future. So if you think there's a certain use case of yours, which we didn't discuss today, don't worry about it being, something that we can't do, or maybe it's not in our scope. You can still talk to us. We could still suggest you some other ways or some best practices to work on it, and you can take that forward. We're more than happy to help you that way too. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you for joining.